President Kim Yoon stood before the United Earth Assembly and announced the decision that would define humanity's future among the stars. After months of debate, votes, and soul-searching, humanity had chosen its path. "We will not abandon the galaxy to collapse," President Kim Yoon said to the assembled representatives of 12 billion humans. "But neither will we return to the old system of galactic governance. Instead, we will build something new, something better." The new Foundation Protocol was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Humanity would return to space not as members of a galactic council, but as teachers and partners. They would help rebuild civilization, but under completely different terms. Dr. Park Sola, now Director of Galactic Reconstruction Science, explained the plan to the Assembly. She was the same woman who had walked out of the Galactic Council 18 months ago. Now she would help build its replacement. "We will establish innovation centers throughout the galaxy," Dr. Park Sola said. "These will not be colonies or territories, but educational facilities, places where surviving alien species can learn not just our technology, but our ways of thinking and problem-solving." The goal was revolutionary. Instead of simply providing technology that aliens could not maintain, humans would teach other species to innovate for themselves. They would share not just their discoveries, but their methods of discovery. Admiral Cho Hana received command of the largest fleet in human history. Not a war fleet, but a construction and education fleet. Her ships carried teachers, engineers, scientists, and builders. Their mission was to establish the foundation of a new kind of galactic civilization. The old Galactic Council tried to maintain peace through control. Admiral Cho Hana told her fleet commanders, "We will maintain peace through education and cooperation. Every species will contribute their unique perspective. Every species will benefit from the innovations of all others." Lee Hyun, the former ambassador who had walked out of the Galactic Council, returned to space with a new title, Reconstruction Coordinator. His job was to work with surviving alien leaders to establish the principles of the new galactic community. The first innovation center was established in the Centauri system. The Centaurians had been good traders but poor scientists. Now human teachers worked with Centaurian students to develop new ways of thinking about complex problems. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A young Centaurian named Kathleen had always been considered slow by her people's standards. She could not memorize trade routes like other Centaurians. She could not calculate profit margins in her head. But under human instruction, she learned to think differently. She learned to question assumptions. She learned to see patterns that others missed. She learned to imagine solutions that did not yet exist. Within 6 months, Kathleen developed a new form of faster-than-light travel that surpassed even human technology. It used quantum principles that human scientists had theorized, but never successfully implemented. Dr. Park Sola was amazed when she reviewed Kathleen's work. "This is extraordinary. She has solved problems that have challenged our best physicists for decades." "How is it possible?" Lee Hyun asked. "Centaurian neural structures process quantum mathematics differently than human brains. They see patterns in space-time that we cannot perceive directly. But they needed human teaching methods to unlock that potential. This became the model for the new galactic civilization. Each species contributed their unique capabilities. Humans provided the innovation framework and problem-solving methods. Together, they achieved things that neither could accomplish alone. The vegan species, once dismissed as impractical artists, developed new forms of sustainable energy based on their deep understanding of natural harmonics. The Polarian navigators, working with human physicists, created new methods of space exploration that could map entire galaxy clusters. Even former enemies joined the new system. The Zephyrians and Cantharis, who had been at war when humanity left, discovered that cooperation under human guidance was more profitable than conflict. But the greatest success was not technological. It was social. The old Galactic Council had maintained order through hierarchy and control. The new galactic community maintained order through mutual respect and shared benefit. Species that had been enemies for centuries learned to work together toward common goals. President Kim Yoon visited the first completed innovation center 2 years after the new Foundation Protocol began. What she saw amazed her. Beings from 15 different species worked together in laboratories and workshops. Human teachers guided alien students through complex problems. Alien students taught human teachers new ways of perceiving reality. Kathleen, now recognized as one of the galaxy's leading innovators, showed President Kim Yuna her latest project, a communication system that could instantly connect any two points in the galaxy without the need for quantum entanglement networks. How does it work? President Kim Yuna asked. It uses the same innovation field that human presence creates, Kathleen explained. But instead of requiring humans to be physically present, it broadcasts the innovation effect through modified space-time. Any species within range gains enhanced creative thinking ability. Dr. Park Sola understood the implications immediately. You have created artificial innovation fields. This could make the new galactic civilization self-sustaining even if humans were to leave again. Kathleen nodded. That was the goal. We learned from the collapse of the old galaxy. No civilization should be dependent on any single species for its survival. 5 years after humanity's return to the galaxy, Lee Hyun stood in the new Galactic Assembly and watched representatives from 200 surviving species work together to solve shared problems. It was smaller than the old Galactic Council, but it was stronger. The new assembly was not a government that ruled over other species. It was a forum where free peoples shared knowledge and coordinated efforts. No species held veto power over others. No species could impose its will on the rest. Decisions were made by consensus after open debate and shared research. Problems were solved through cooperation and innovation rather than rules and restrictions. President Kim Yuna, now older and wiser, reflected on the lessons learned during humanity's journey from galactic outcasts to galactic teachers. True strength does not come from domination or control, she said during her farewell address to the Earth Assembly. It comes from lifting others up until they can stand beside you as equals. The galaxy humanity had left behind was gone forever. Many species had been lost during the collapse. Entire civilizations had vanished into darkness. But the galaxy that emerged from the ashes was something unprecedented, a truly cooperative community where different species contributed their unique gifts to solve problems that benefited everyone. The greatest monument to this new civilization was not a building or a space station. It was a simple principle that guided all interactions between species. No being should ever again face suffering that could be prevented through cooperation and innovation. Dr. Park Sola, now in her 70s, supervised the completion of the galaxy's first comprehensive innovation network. Thousands of innovation centers connected through Kathleen's breakthrough communication technology. Any species could access the combined knowledge and problem-solving ability of the entire galactic community. We have built something that has never existed before, Dr. Park Sola told her successor. A civilization that grows stronger through diversity rather than weaker through conflict. The final test came when explorers discovered an unknown species on the galactic rim. The Helix people had never made contact with galactic civilization. They were facing extinction from a plague that was destroying their homeworld. The old Galactic Council would have debated for months about whether to intervene. They would have formed committees and written regulations and worried about the political implications of helping strangers. The new galactic community simply acted. Within weeks, ships from dozens of species arrived in Helix space, carrying medical supplies, research teams, and teachers. The plague was cured using a combination of human biotechnology, vegan harmonic healing, and Centaurian quantum medicine. But more importantly, the Helix people were welcomed into the galactic community as equals. They were offered knowledge and friendship without conditions or restrictions. Kathleen, now an elder teacher herself, worked with young Helix students to unlock their species' unique gifts. They discovered that Helix neural patterns could perceive time flows differently than other species. This led to breakthroughs in temporal mechanics that advanced the understanding of the entire galaxy. The lesson was clear. Every species had something valuable to contribute. Every being deserved the chance to reach their full potential. Lee Hyun, now an old man, sat in his garden on Earth and watched the news reports from across the galaxy. Innovation centers were reporting breakthrough discoveries every day. New species were joining the galactic community. Ancient conflicts were being resolved through cooperation rather than force. The galaxy was smaller than it had been before the collapse. But it was also wiser, kinder, and more creative than anyone had ever imagined possible. Humanity had walked away from the Galactic Council and the universe had collapsed. But from that collapse had emerged something beautiful. A civilization based not on control, but on... Captain Minho Park stood on the bridge of his old warship and watched the stars through the cracked window. His ship was called the Defiant, and it was falling apart like everything else humanity owned these days. The metal walls had rust spots, and the air recycler made strange noises that worried everyone on board. Minho touched the scar on his left cheek and remembered how he got it during the battle at Proxima 5 years ago. The communication panel beeped, and Minho walked over to answer it. The face of Admiral Chen appeared on the screen, but the image was fuzzy because their equipment was so old. Chen looked tired, and his hair had gone completely gray since the last time they met. "Minho, we have a problem," Chen said. "The Vorthak are sending a message to Earth right now, and it does not sound good." Minho felt his stomach drop. The Vorthak were the alien race that had conquered humanity 150 years ago. They were tall creatures with blue skin and 4 arms, and they treated humans like insects. Their ships were massive, and their weapons could destroy entire planets. Humanity had tried to fight them once and lost badly. "What kind of message?" Minho asked. "They want 80% of our population for slave labor in their mining colonies," Chen replied. "If we refuse, they will destroy Earth completely." Minho closed his eyes and tried to stay calm. He had seen what Vorthak mining colonies looked like. Humans worked until they died, and then the aliens threw their bodies into furnaces. No one ever came back from those places. "How long do we have?" Minho asked. 72 hours, Chen said. "Prime Minister Subin Lee is meeting with the council right now." Down on Earth in the capital city of New Geneva, Prime Minister Subin Lee sat at a long table with 12 other government leaders. The room was quiet except for the sound of rain hitting the windows. Everyone looked scared, and no one wanted to speak first. Subin was a small woman with short black hair and dark eyes that missed nothing. She had been leading Earth for 10 years and had always known this day might come. The Vorthak had been taking more and more humans every year for their work camps. Now they wanted almost everyone. "We cannot give them 80% of our people," said Defense Minister Taewon Kim. "That would be the end of humanity as we know it." "But if we refuse, they will kill everyone anyway," replied Economic Minister Jong-ho Park. "At least this way some humans will survive." Subin looked around the table at the frightened faces. These were supposed to be the strongest leaders on Earth, but they all looked like children who had lost their parents. She thought about her own daughter who was studying engineering at the university. Would she have to watch her child be taken, away to die in some distant mine? "I need time to think," Subin said. "We will meet again in 6 hours." While the government leaders argued about impossible choices, a young man named Hyunwoo Kim was crawling through the ruins of an old research facility. Hyunwoo was thin and had dirt on his clothes from days of digging through rubble. His flashlight cast strange shadows on the broken walls around him. The facility had been called CERN, and it was where human scientists used to study particles and energy before the Vorthak invasion. Most people thought everything valuable had been destroyed when the aliens bombed it, but Hyunwoo believed something was still hidden deep underground. He squeezed through a gap between 2 fallen concrete blocks and found himself in a room that had been sealed for over a century. The air was stale, and his flashlight beam revealed banks of computers that looked almost new. On the wall was a sign that said, "Project Starbreak" in faded letters. Hyunwoo had heard rumors about Project Starbreak from his grandfather, who had been a scientist before the invasion. The old man claimed that humans had been building secret weapons that could fight the Vorthak, but the project was hidden when defeat became certain. Most people thought it was just a story, but Hyunwoo had spent months searching through old records and maps. He walked to the nearest computer terminal and pressed the power button. Nothing happened at first, but then lights began blinking and the screen came to life. Words appeared that made Hyunwoo's heart race. The computer was asking for an authorization code. Hyunwoo remembered his grandfather's last words before he died. The old man had whispered a series of numbers that seemed random, but Hyunwoo had memorized them anyway. He typed the numbers into the computer and held his breath. The screen changed, and suddenly Hyunwoo was looking at technical drawings of spaceships unlike anything he had ever seen. These were not the crude human vessels that barely functioned. These ships looked sleek and powerful, with weapons that the computer claimed could punch through Vorthak shields like they were paper. Far away from Earth on a transport ship heading home, a woman named Ji-won Choi sat in the cargo hold and tried not to remember the things she had seen. Ji-won had escaped from a Vorthak prison camp on Kepler 7, and it had taken her 2 years to steal a ship and make her way back to human space. Ji-won was tall and muscular from hard labor, and her arms were covered with scars from Vorthak punishment, devices. Her black hair was cut short, and her brown eyes were always watching for danger. She had learned not to trust anyone completely, because trust could get you killed in the camps. The transport ship was old and slow, but it was heading to Earth, and that was all that mattered. Ji-won had information that the human government needed to hear. She had worked in the Vorthak Communications Center for 3 years before her escape, and she knew things about their military that could save lives. The ship's captain was a smuggler named Dae-ho Lim, who asked too many questions, but was willing to take Ji-won to Earth for the right price. Dae-ho was short and had a beard that was turning gray. He wore a jacket covered with patches from different worlds, and his ship smelled like engine oil and bad coffee. "Why do you want to go to Earth so badly?" Dae-ho asked as he brought Ji-won a meal of processed protein and water. "Everyone knows. The Vorthak are planning something big there." "That is exactly why I need to go," Ji-won replied. "I have information that might help." Dae-ho looked at her scarred arms and nodded slowly. He had transported other escaped prisoners over the years, and he knew they all carried terrible secrets. Most of them never talked about what they had seen in the camps, but their eyes told the whole story. Back on Earth, in the underground tunnels beneath New Seoul, a man named Tae-hyung Yang was meeting with other resistance fighters. The tunnels had been built as subway lines before the invasion, but now they served as hiding places for humans who refused to accept Vorthak rule. Tae-hyung was a natural leader who could convince people to follow him into impossible situations. He had brown hair that was always messy and a smile that made people trust him even when they should not. His followers called him the Ghost because he could appear anywhere and disappear just as quickly. "The government is going to give in," Tae-hyung told the 20 fighters gathered around him. "They always do when the Vorthak make threats." "So what do we do?" asked Min-seo Park, a young woman who carried explosives in her backpack. "We fight," Tae-hyung replied. "Even if everyone else gives up, we keep fighting until there is nothing left to fight with." The resistance fighters nodded and began checking their weapons. Most of their guns were old, and their ammunition was running low, but they would use rocks if they had to. They had all lost family members to Vorthak cruelty, and they would rather die fighting than live as slaves. Meanwhile, in the Earth Defense Command Center, General Nayeon Kang was studying tactical displays that showed the approaching Vorthak fleet. Nayeon was known for her brilliant military mind and her ability to find solutions when everyone else saw only problems. She had short gray hair and wore a uniform that was always perfectly pressed. The displays showed that the Vorthak had sent their Crimson Armada to Earth. This was their most powerful fleet, with 300 advanced warships led by a massive dreadnought called the Void Crusher. Against this force, humanity had 40 old ships that barely had enough fuel to reach orbit. "It is hopeless," said Colonel Jinsu Lee, Nayeon's second-in-command. "We cannot fight that many ships with what we have." "Numbers are not everything," Nayeon replied while studying the enemy formation. "The Vorthak have grown soft after centuries of easy victories. They do not expect real resistance anymore." Nayeon was planning something desperate, but she needed more time. If the government rejected the Vorthak ultimatum, she would have to delay the enemy fleet long enough for evacuation ships to escape Earth. It would mean sacrificing her own life and the lives of every defender, but some humans might survive to carry on the fight. As the 72-hour deadline approached, all of these separate stories began to come together. Hyunwoo Kim had found humanity's secret weapon, Ji-won Choi was bringing crucial intelligence about Vorthak weaknesses, and Tae-hyung Yang was preparing his fighters for a final stand. Prime Minister Subin Lee would soon have to make the most important decision in human history. The fate of humanity hung in the balance, and time was running out. Hyunwoo Kim stared at the computer screen in disbelief as more information about Project Starbreak appeared before his eyes. The files showed that human scientists had not just been studying Vorthak technology, but had actually improved it in ways the aliens never imagined. The project contained blueprints for 12 experimental warships that combined human creativity with alien engineering. Each ship design was named after Earth's most dangerous predators. The flagship was called Iron Dragon, and it was larger than any human vessel ever built. The Shadow Wolf was designed for stealth attacks, while the Steel Tiger carried the heaviest weapons. All 12 ships had been built in secret orbital shipyards and hidden in the asteroid belt, where Vorthak sensors could not find them. The most amazing discovery was the quantum phase weapons that each ship carried. These devices could tear holes in space itself and punch through any known shield technology. The computer files showed test results that proved the weapons could destroy Vorthak ships with a single shot. But there was a warning in the files that made Hyunwoo's blood run cold. The quantum phase technology was unstable and dangerous to use. Each weapon could only fire a limited number of times before it burned out completely. The ships had enough power for maybe a dozen battles before they became useless. The scientists who built them knew this was a desperate last resort that could only be used once. Hyunwoo copied all the files onto a portable storage device and ran through the tunnels toward the surface. He had to get this information to someone in the government who could authorize the mission. The secret fleet had been waiting for 150 years, but now humanity finally had a reason to wake it up. Meanwhile, Jiwon Choi's transport ship was approaching Earth's outer defense stations. Through the small window, she could see the blue and white planet that she had dreamed about every night during her imprisonment. But she also saw something that made her heart sink. Vorthak ships were already positioning themselves around Earth, like hungry wolves surrounding wounded prey. Daeho Lim cursed under his breath as his sensors picked up the enemy fleet. "They are early," he said. "The deadline is not supposed to be for another day." "The Vorthak always arrive early when they plan to attack," Jiwon replied. "It is one of their standard tactics. They want to put pressure on the government by showing their strength." The transport ship docked at New Seoul Station, and Jiwon immediately requested a meeting with Earth Defense Command. She was taken to a small room where General Nayeon Kang was waiting with several other officers. Nayeon looked tired, but her eyes were sharp and alert. "You claim to have intelligence about Vorthak military operations," Nayeon said. "What makes you think we should trust someone who just escaped from prison?" Jiwon pulled up her sleeve and showed the scars on her arm. "These are from Vorthak neural disruptors," she said. "They use them to torture information out of human prisoners. But I worked in their communications center for 3 years, and I learned things they never meant me to know." She explained how the Vorthak command structure worked and revealed their greatest weakness. The entire empire was controlled from a single massive space station called Nexus Prime that was hidden in their home system. All military orders and battle plans came from this station, and if it was destroyed, the Vorthak fleets would be left without central command. "The problem is that Nexus Prime is protected by their most elite forces," Jiwon continued. "No enemy has ever gotten close to it because it is surrounded by 50 of their best warships. It would take a miracle to reach the station, let alone destroy it." Nayeon listened carefully and asked detailed questions about Vorthak ship designs and battle tactics. This woman clearly knew what she was talking about, and her information could save thousands of lives. But even with this knowledge, humanity's small fleet had no chance against the Crimson Armada that was surrounding Earth. That moment, Hyunwoo Kim burst into the room carrying his storage device. He was out of breath and covered with dirt, but his eyes were bright with excitement. "I found it," he gasped. "I found Project Starbreak." Nayeon frowned because she had never heard of any project with that name. Earth's military records were supposed to be complete, but there were always rumors about secret weapons that had been hidden during the early days of the invasion. Most officers assumed these stories were just wishful thinking by people who could not accept defeat. Hyunwoo connected his device to the room's main computer, and the technical specifications for the 12 hidden warships appeared on the wall display. Everyone in the room fell silent as they studied the impossible designs. These ships were far more advanced than anything humanity was supposed to possess. "Where are they?" Nayeon asked. "Hidden in Asteroid Belt Station 7, Hyunwoo replied. "The files contain activation codes and detailed instructions for bringing them online, but we need authorization from the highest levels of government to access them." While this meeting was taking place, Prime Minister Subin Lee was facing the most difficult decision of her career. The government council had been debating for hours, and they were no closer to agreeing on what to do. Half the ministers wanted to accept the Vorthak ultimatum and sacrifice 80% of humanity to save the remaining 20%. The other half insisted that surrender would only delay the inevitable extinction of the human race. "We have seen what happens in Vorthak labor camps," said Foreign Minister Harem Song. "The prisoners work until they die, and then their bodies are burned. Giving them our people is the same as executing them ourselves. But if we refuse, they will kill everyone," argued Interior Minister Sang-woo Choi. "At least some humans will survive if we cooperate." Subin rubbed her temples and tried to think clearly. She had received reports about the secret meeting at Defense Command and the discovery of Project Starbreak. The idea of hidden superweapons sounded like fantasy, but she had learned to trust Nayeon Kang's judgment. If there was even a small chance that humanity could fight back then, she had to take it. "I am going to reject the ultimatum," Subin announced, "and I am authorizing the activation of Project Starbreak." The room erupted in arguments as ministers shouted over each other. Some accused Subin of condemning humanity to extinction, while others praised her courage. But Subin had made her choice, and now she had to live with the consequences. Captain Minho Park received his new orders while his ship was docked for emergency repairs. He was told to report immediately to Asteroid Belt Station 7 for a classified mission that could change the course of the war. Minho had never heard of this station, but he followed orders and set course for the coordinates he was given. What he found there took his breath away. Station 7 was enormous and completely hidden inside a hollowed-out asteroid. The entrance was concealed by sensor dampeners that made it invisible to Vorthak detection systems. Inside the station were 12 of the most beautiful warships Minho had ever seen. The Iron Dragon was waiting for him with a crew of volunteers who had been secretly trained for this mission. Hyunwoo Kim was there as chief engineer, and Jiwon Choi had been assigned as tactical advisor. Looking at his new ship, Minho felt something he had not experienced in years. For the first time since the Proxima massacre, he felt hope. The quantum phase weapons were unlike anything in the human arsenal. They did not fire projectiles or energy beams, but instead created tears in the fabric of space that could reach across impossible distances. The targeting systems were so advanced, they could lock onto enemy ships that were still in hyperspace. But Hyunwoo warned everyone about the limitations. "Each weapon has enough power for maybe 15 shots, he explained. "After that, the quantum matrix will collapse and the ship will be defenseless. We have to make every shot count, because we will not get a second chance." Jiwon studied the tactical displays and began planning their attack strategy. The Vorthak were predictable in their arrogance and always used the same battle formations. If the human fleet could hit them fast and hard in the right places, they might be able to cause enough damage to break their lines. "The key is surprise," she told Minho. "The Vorthak do not believe humans are capable of building advanced weapons. They will not be expecting ships like these to exist." On Earth, the deadline was approaching and tension filled the air like electricity before a storm. Taehyung-yang and his resistance fighters had moved into position throughout the major cities. They knew the government was planning to reject the ultimatum, and they were ready to fight when the Vorthak landed their ground troops. The aliens always followed the same pattern when they conquered a world. First, they would bombard military targets from orbit to eliminate organized resistance. Then they would land troops to capture important government officials and infrastructure. Finally, they would round up the population for transport to labor camps. Taehyung's plan was to disrupt this process by attacking the landing zones and making it impossible for the Vorthak to establish control. His fighters had explosives and stolen weapons, but they were outnumbered by thousands to one. Still, they would make the aliens pay for every city block. General Nayeon Kang was coordinating Earth's conventional defenses, even though she knew they were hopeless against the Crimson Armada. The Starbreak fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Vorthak territory, like ghosts materializing from the void. Captain Minho Park stood on the bridge of the Iron Dragon and watched as 11 other ships took their positions around his flagship. Each vessel was a masterpiece of human engineering that had been waiting 150 years for this moment. Minho felt the weight of command pressing down on his shoulders like a physical force. These 12 ships represented humanity's last hope, and if he failed, then billions of people would die in Vorthak labor camps. He touched the scar on his cheek and remembered the friends he had lost at Proxima Centauri. This time would be different because this time humanity had the better weapons. "All ships report ready for combat," announced Communications Officer Soyeon Park from her station. Her voice was steady, but Minho could hear the excitement underneath. Everyone knew they were about to make history. Jiwon Choi studied the tactical display that showed their first target. The Kaleth system was a major Vorthak supply hub with orbital shipyards and fuel depots that fed their war machine. Intelligence reports indicated there were 30 enemy warships protecting the system, but they were standard patrol vessels, not expecting any kind of attack. "The Vorthak have never faced human quantum phase weapons," Jiwon told Minho. "They do not know what we are capable of, so they will not have their shields configured properly. We should be able to destroy most of their fleet before they can respond." Hyunwoo Kim was monitoring the weapon systems from the engineering station. The two quantum phase arrays were operating perfectly, but he knew they were fragile and could burn out if pushed too hard. Each shot had to count because they would not get many chances to use these incredible weapons. "All weapon systems showing green," Hyunwoo reported. "We have full power to the quantum matrices." The Starbreak fleet accelerated toward Kaleth at maximum speed. The ships moved through space like deadly predators stalking their prey. Their hulls were coated with sensor-absorbing materials that made them nearly invisible to Vorthak detection systems. The enemy would not see them coming until it was too late. When they reached the edge of the Kaleth system, the Vorthak patrol ships were caught completely off guard. The aliens were used to dealing with primitive human vessels that pose no real threat. They had grown lazy and confident after centuries of easy victories against inferior opponents. The Iron Dragon fired first, and the quantum phase beam tore through space to strike a Vorthak heavy cruiser. The enemy ship's shields collapsed instantly, and the beam continued through the hull like it was made of paper. The cruiser exploded in a brilliant flash of light that could be seen from 3 planets away. All across the system, Starbreak ships opened fire with weapons that defied the laws of physics. The Shadow Wolf destroyed 2 enemy destroyers with a single shot that created a space-time rift between them. The Steel Tiger's weapons punched through a Vorthak battleship from nose to tail, leaving nothing but scattered debris. The enemy tried to return fire, but their weapons could not penetrate the advanced shields that protected the human ships. Vorthak plasma cannons and fusion missiles struck harmlessly against barriers that bent space itself to deflect incoming attacks. In less than 10 minutes, 30 alien warships had been reduced to floating wreckage. "Impossible!" gasped the Vorthak system commander before his flagship was destroyed by the Storm Eagle. It was the last word he ever spoke. News of the victory spread through the galaxy's underground networks faster than the speed of light. On HFY, dozens of worlds' enslaved species looked up at the stars and dared to hope that freedom might be possible. For the first time in living memory, someone had defeated the Vorthak in open battle. On a smuggler's ship in the Andromeda Spiral, Daeho, Lim received an encrypted message about the Kaleth attack. He could hardly believe what he was reading, but the source was reliable. Humans had somehow built weapons that could destroy Vorthak warships, and they were using them to strike back at their oppressors. Daeho immediately sent messages to his contacts among the other enslaved species. The Zalari were aquatic beings who had been forced to work in underwater mining operations for 2 centuries. The Corvan were insect-like warriors who had been reduced to shock troops in the Vorthak army. Both races had been waiting for a chance to rebel, but they needed hope that victory was possible. The news gave them that hope. If humans could build such weapons, then perhaps other species could find ways to fight back as well. Across the galaxy, prison camps and slave colonies began to stir with the first whispers of revolution. Back on Earth, the situation was growing desperate. The Vorthak Crimson Armada had begun orbital bombardment of major cities, and millions of humans were fleeing to underground shelters. The aliens were targeting military installations first, but everyone knew they would soon start hitting civilian areas. General Naeon Kang watched from her command bunker as the Earth Defense Fleet engaged the enemy in a hopeless battle above the planet. Her ships were fighting bravely, but they were hopelessly outmatched by Vorthak technology. Every few minutes, another human vessel disappeared in a ball of superheated plasma. "We are losing ships faster than we can count them," reported Admiral Chen over the communication system. His voice was filled with static because the Vorthak were jamming most frequencies. "But we are making them pay for every kill." Nayeon knew her forces could not hold out much longer, but they had already accomplished their mission. The evacuation ships had escaped Earth's gravity well and were heading for the outer colonies. At least some humans would survive even if the home world fell. In the underground tunnels of New Seoul, Taehyung Yang was preparing his resistance fighters for the coming ground assault. Intelligence reports indicated that Vorthak dropships would land within hours to begin capturing the surviving population. The aliens preferred to take prisoners alive because dead slaves could not work in their mines. "Remember what we practiced?" Taehyung told his fighters. "Hit them hard and fast, then disappear before they can bring up reinforcements. We cannot defeat them in a straight fight, but we can make them afraid to leave their landing zones." Min Seo Park checked her explosives one more time and smiled grimly. She had lost her entire family to Vorthak raiders 3 years ago, and now she finally had a chance for revenge. "How many dropships are we expecting?" she asked. "Intelligence says at least 50, Taehyung replied. "Each one carries 200 alien soldiers plus their war machines. We are outnumbered, but we know this city better than they do." Meanwhile, the Starbreak fleet was moving deeper into Vorthak territory to strike their next target. Captain Minho Park had chosen the Zerion sector, which contained major fuel refineries that supplied the Crimson Armada. If they could destroy these facilities, it would force the enemy fleet to withdraw from Earth to protect their supply lines. The attack on Zerion was even more devastating than the assault on Kaleth. The Vorthak had tried to reinforce the system after receiving word of the earlier defeat, but they still did not understand what they were facing. Their commanders assumed the humans had somehow stolen a few advanced weapons, but they could not believe an entire fleet of such ships existed. Jiwon Choi coordinated the battle from her position on the Iron Dragon's bridge. She had studied Vorthak tactics for years and knew exactly how they would respond to the attack. The enemy always tried to form defensive formations around their most important assets, but this made them vulnerable to the quantum phase weapons that could strike from impossible angles. "Target their command ship first," she advised Minho. "Without central coordination, their formation will collapse." The Iron Dragon's main weapon fired across a distance of 50,000 kilometers and struck the Vorthak flagship directly in the bridge. The quantum phase beam created a localized space-time distortion that crushed the ship's command section like an invisible fist. The rest of the enemy fleet lost coordination immediately and began firing in random directions. Within an hour, the entire Zerion defense force had been eliminated, and the fuel refineries were burning wreckage floating in space. The Starbreak fleet had lost nothing except some power from their quantum matrices, but Hyunwoo Kim warned that they were approaching the limits of what the weapons could handle. "We have maybe 6 more battles before the quantum phase arrays burn out completely," he told Minho. "After that, we will be fighting with conventional weapons against superior numbers." The news of humanity's second impossible victory reached Earth just as the first Vorthak dropships were entering the atmosphere. Prime Minister Subin Lee was in a secure bunker beneath the capital city when she received the report. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to smile. "Broadcast this information on all frequencies," she ordered her communications staff. "I want every human on Earth to know that we are fighting back." The announcement had an immediate effect on human morale. Resistance fighters who had been preparing for suicide missions suddenly believed they might actually have a chance to win. Citizens who had been hiding in basements emerged to throw rocks at Vorthak soldiers. The entire planet seemed to come alive with renewed hope. But Admiral Thexmore aboard the Void Crusher was not impressed by these small victories. He had lost 2 minor supply stations, but his main fleet was still intact and Earth was... Captain Minho Park stared at the star charts showing the route to the Vorthak home system and felt fear crawling up his spine like ice. The Starbreak fleet had won 3 impossible victories, but now they were heading into the most heavily defended region of space in the galaxy. Nexus Prime was waiting for them, surrounded by 50 of the enemy's most advanced warships. "Are you certain about these coordinates?" Minho asked Jiwon Choi for the 10th time. Jiwon nodded grimly. "I memorized the location during my time in the prison camps. The Vorthak used to brag about how no enemy had ever gotten within a light year of Nexus Prime." They consider it completely untouchable. Hyunwoo Kim looked up from his engineering console with worry written across his face. The quantum phase weapons are showing serious strain. We might have enough power for one more major battle, but after that the matrices will collapse completely. The 12 ships of the Starbreak fleet were pushing their engines to maximum speed as they raced through hyperspace toward the Vorthak home system. Behind them, intelligence reports indicated that enemy reinforcements were converging from all across the galaxy. Admiral Thexmore had finally realized the true threat that humanity represented and was calling in every available ship to hunt them down. "We have maybe 6 hours before they catch up to us," reported Communications Officer Soyeon Park. "After that, we will be trapped between their pursuit fleets and the home system defenses." Minho made the hardest decision of his military career. "All ships prepare for emergency hyperspace exit. We are going in now before the enemy can organize their defenses." The Starbreak fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Vorthak home system and immediately came under attack from automated defense platforms. These ancient weapons had been guarding the system for thousands of years, and they fired streams of plasma that could melt asteroids. But the human ship's advanced shields deflected the attacks while they accelerated toward their target. Nexus Prime hung in space like a mechanical moon surrounded by a constellation of enemy warships. The massive station was larger than anything humans had ever built, and it pulsed with energy that could be felt across the entire system. This was the beating heart of the Vorthak Empire, and destroying it would cripple their ability to coordinate military operations. But as the human fleet drew closer, Ji-won Choi made a discovery that horrified her. The station was not just a command center, but a prison that held the captured souls of entire civilizations. The Vorthak had been feeding the life energy of conquered species into the station's power core for millennia. "I can detect quantum signatures from dozens of extinct races," she reported with tears in her eyes. "They are using the suffering of countless beings to power their empire." Among those trapped energy patterns, Ji-won recognized the signatures of humans who had been captured during the initial invasion 150 years ago. Her own friends and family members who had died in the prison camps were somehow still alive inside the station, their consciousness preserved in eternal torment. The Vorthak Imperial Guard moved to intercept the human fleet with tactics perfected over centuries of warfare. These were not the patrol ships that the Starbreak fleet had been destroying, but elite vessels crewed by the Empire's most experienced commanders. Each ship was equipped with weapons that could crack planets and shields that had never been penetrated. 50 enemy vessels moving to engagement range, announced Tactical Officer Young-ho Kim. They are forming a defensive sphere around Nexus Prime. The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. The human ships danced through space like deadly spirits as their quantum phase weapons tore holes in reality itself. The Shadow Wolf disappeared from sensors only to reappear behind an enemy battleship and destroy it with a single shot. The Steel Tiger's weapons created gravitational anomalies that crushed 3 Vorthak cruisers simultaneously. But the Imperial Guard fought back with desperate fury. They had never faced weapons like these, and their commanders were beginning to realize that the Vorthak Empire might actually fall. Their plasma cannons and fusion missiles filled space with deadly energy, while their fighters swarmed around the human ships like angry insects. The Storm Eagle took a direct hit from a Vorthak superweapon and exploded in a flash of white light. Captain Jinwoo Lee and his entire crew died instantly, but their sacrifice allowed the Steel Tiger to destroy the enemy dreadnought that had killed them. One by one, the human ships were paying the ultimate price for their desperate mission. On Earth, the situation had reached its breaking point. The Vorthak ground forces had landed in 12 major cities and were systematically rounding up the human population. But Tai Hyung-yang's resistance fighters were making them pay for every block they captured. The aliens had expected easy conquest, but instead found themselves fighting house to house against determined defenders. "They are bringing up heavy weapons," reported Minseo Park over the radio. She was hiding in the ruins of a shopping center that had been bombed the day before. "I count at least 6 walker tanks heading for the government district." Taehyung consulted his tactical map and realized they were running out of places to retreat. The Vorthak were slowly tightening their grip on the city, and soon his fighters would be trapped, but he refused to surrender even if it meant fighting to the last bullet. "All teams converge on Grid 7, he ordered. "We make our final. Stand at the Memorial Plaza." Meanwhile, Prime Minister Subin Lee was coordinating the global resistance from her underground bunker. Reports were coming in from around the world of human forces fighting against impossible odds. The Vorthak had superior numbers and technology, but they were facing opponents who preferred death to slavery. "The evacuation ships have reached the outer colonies," reported Defense Minister Tae-Won Kim. "At least 30 million humans have escaped Earth." Subin felt a mixture of relief and sorrow. Those refugees would carry on the human race even if Earth fell, but she would never see them again. She had chosen to stay and fight alongside her people no matter what happened. Far away in the Vorthak home system, the battle for Nexus Prime was reaching its climax. Half the Starbreak fleet had been destroyed, but they had taken most of the Imperial Guard with them. The surviving human ships were running on emergency power, and their quantum phase weapons were beginning to fail. "Quantum matrix collapse in Idor-Dasa, the main weapons array," Hyunwoo Kim reported as sparks flew from his console. "We have maybe 3 more shots before complete system failure." Captain Minho Park looked around his damaged bridge and saw the faces of crew members who knew they were going to die. But their eyes showed no fear, only determination to complete their mission. They had come too far to give up now. "All remaining ships target Nexus Prime directly," Minho ordered. "We end this now." The Iron Dragon and her 3 surviving sister ships accelerated toward the massive station, while the last enemy defenders tried desperately to stop them. Vorthak fighters swarmed around the human vessels like wasps, but the quantum phase weapons swatted them aside. Nothing could prevent the final assault. Jiwon Choi had taken control of the station's communication array and was broadcasting technical data about Vorthak military installations to rebellion forces throughout the galaxy. If the Starbreak fleet died here, at least their sacrifice would help others continue the fight for freedom. "Uploading complete tactical database," she announced. "Every hidden base and supply depot in the Empire is now known to our allies." The Iron Dragon's main weapon charged for its final shot as Nexus Prime filled the view screen ahead of them. But the quantum matrix was fluctuating wildly, and Hyunwoo Kim realized the weapon might explode instead of firing. The station's energy field was interfering with their technology in ways they had never encountered. "The quantum phase array is becoming unstable," Hyunwoo warned. "If we fire now, the feedback could destroy us along with the target." Minho Park did not hesitate. "Fire everything we have." The combined firepower of 4 human ships struck Nexus Prime simultaneously, and the results were beyond anything they had imagined. The station's power core contained the compressed life energy of billions of beings, and when the quantum phase weapons disrupted that containment, the explosion could be seen from 12 star systems away. The shock wave that followed did not just destroy the station, but sent ripples through subspace that disabled every Vorthak command ship in the galaxy. In a single moment, the mighty Empire lost its ability to coordinate military operations across thousands of worlds. Their scattered fleets were suddenly cut off from central command and left to fend for themselves. On Earth, Admiral Thexmore watched in horror as his communication systems went dead and his tactical displays went dark. The Void Crusher was still a powerful warship, but without connection to the command network, he could not coordinate with other Vorthak forces. For the first time in his career, he felt something that his species had almost forgotten: fear.